You did have an opportunity to sit down with their interim manager for the U.S. men's national team, Paul. His name is Anthony Hudson, and it was a great article on The Athletic. Everybody should go read it. And you humanize Anthony Hudson. We don't need you to humanize Anthony Hudson. We're here to criticize him for every single thing that he does. So you go in there and he's doing stuff and like doing prison reform and helping dogs and all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't want to like the guy, man. You know? Now that's the way the internet works. You can't humanize anybody. So no, it was a great article. And it was really thoughtful, and I felt like I got to know Anthony Hudson a little bit more and his intentions. One of his intentions was to reach out to Gio Reyna and fly over to Germany and actually have a sit-down with him, and that seemed to be a very positive thing. It was nice to see somebody from U.S. Soccer kind of address the Gio Reyna situation from him as a player and not necessarily all the other noise that's surrounding him. But let's move into the U.S. men's national team talk. Talk to us about this interview with Anthony Hudson and what you think the future is in store for him and for the program overall.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the Gio Reyna stuff. I do credit Anthony Hudson. I mean, here you are, like in this interim role that, first of all, is lasting longer than you expected it, right? Because of Ernie Stewart leaving. He probably thought, I'm taking January camp and then I'm gone. And now it could be Nations League in March, Nations League in June if they win these and go to the semis and finals, and Gold Cup in the summer as well. And so he recognized and understood once he saw that the assignment might last longer, that somebody was going to go have to touch base with Gio Reyna, right? Because if you're calling in your full team for Nations League in March, Gio Reyna's probably going to be on that team as long as he's healthy and producing. And he was also willing to talk about it, which he could have just been like, no comment. I think he recognized that at some point that elephant had to be addressed, both behind the scenes and actually going and sitting down with Gio Reyna and saying, hey, are we good? How are you feeling mentally? Are things good? Are you going to be ready to come back in March, considering everything that's happened? And also with us, with the media, to acknowledge, to not just like put out there, oh, I'm going to be at the Dortmund Chelsea Champions League game and then like not talk about it again after that, but to say, hey, we had to go have this talk. And I thought what he said was interesting. He said, look, for Gio as a player, as a young kid, he had an issue in the World Cup camp. We addressed it. He had a positive response. And as far as I'm concerned, it was over after that. And he even said, essentially like, he's not responsible for stuff that happened after the camp. And, I wanted to check in on him. He's a young kid, a young player, and I wanted to make sure mentally he's okay. There are already huge expectations on him. And then you have all this other stuff. So I thought it was, well done by Anthony Hudson in general. But I think it also shows the challenge that exists right now around this men's national team. Like it felt for the first time that there was real momentum around the team coming out of the World Cup. There were positives to pull from it. Obviously disappointment in the Netherlands performance, but like good things were happening. And then, this bomb went off and I feel like right now it's like question marks, like nothing but question marks around the team. Anthony Hudson's not going to solve pretty much any of those question marks, but this one thing he could do, which is reintegrate Gio Reyna into the group. And, obviously we're not there yet. We're not to the March Nations League games, but if he's able to do that, if he brings Gio in and Gio gets his first caps and the ball starts rolling on moving past it, I think that would be a pretty significant accomplishment for an interim manager.
Knowing that he is interim, and I'm not sure what the next steps are for him there, what percentage opportunity he has to stick around on some sort of level. Did he speak at all about any of the other goals that he has while he's in there? You talk about that's one thing he can be extremely impactful on, right? To help and support. Were there other things that, sometimes when you think about interim, you think about just somebody who's sort of holding the fort down until the next person comes, but clearly he's got some plans to create some sort of impact while he's there. Did he speak anything else about what his goals are?
Yeah, I mean, to Jimmy's point, like before I sat down with Anthony Hudson, I kind of thought about the Colorado tenure and especially the end of the Colorado tenure, the interview he gave that essentially led to him exiting as a manager. Not successful on the field, not a great quote about a bottom team and bottom players. The larger point was probably missed there where he's saying like our owner doesn't invest to the level of other teams. Not handled great. And I thought his take on this job was really good. He was like, look, I've learned the hard way that when I am focused on anything outside of like doing a good job right here, right now, and I worry about what my next step is or what my next thing is, that's where I start to mess up. And, I want to focus on basically helping this team keep moving forward. Now, part of that is going to be on the field, but part of it's not. Gio Reyna off the field. And the other thing is he is still recruiting dual nationals. And I think that's really important. He wouldn't name them. Got a little wink, wink. I think there's, Balogun might have been having a conversation with his agent. He wouldn't say any names. He also mentioned that he worked with Mikey Veras, the U20 manager, to go after a really highly rated U20 player that is a dual national, and to kind of sit down in a meeting there and present what the plan would be for that player with the senior national team and the things that the senior team has coming up after, presumably after he leaves with the 2024 Copa America. So I think he recognizes that even if this is not a permanent job for him, and the odds are it's not, right? The odds are he's going to manage.
Hell to the no.
They hire a sporting director.
He recognizes that right now.
But he's saying, look, my job is to act like it is my job right now. And part of that is recruiting for the future. Part of that is laying out the vision for the players for the future until the guy gets hired, the person gets hired to take over.
Well, I love the commitment in his role to say, I'm going to make the most of it. If I'm the head coach and I'm running the show, then guess what? I'm going to do as much as I can with as little time as I have, or the unknown time that I have, which is great. If you could get Florian Balogun, because I know Jimmy and Heath have been dying to get him into camp.
Come on, you're in the same boat with us.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, he did convince Zendejas to commit to the U.S. At least that's what the news is reporting. But I'm curious, from your perspective, who is the right next choice for the manager? If there were 3 candidates who come to mind for you, who would those be? And have you heard names floated around? I know Jesse Marsh is available, but is he a right fit for this group? Many would argue no with his playing style. So what would be the ideal candidates for the job?
I mean, it's so hard to tell for a couple different reasons. One, I don't know what they're going to do with sporting director role. Like, if they hire an American in the sporting director role, I think his list of candidates is going to look completely different versus if they go international. The other side of this is budget. The U.S. soccer is not rolling in the money like they were before. They've had a lot of different expenses over the last few years that have kind of whittled that down. So can they compete with what the highest paid coaches are making? Even guys that are below that, Roberto Martinez, for example, like that's way above what Greg Berhalter was making. So knowing but if you're the board of U.S. soccer, you're looking at the 2026 World Cup and saying, hey, we're expecting a lot of money coming in. Like, let's go ahead and put money into this coaching role. The last X factor for me is the biggest name that anyone can come up with for the job. And I've heard could have some legitimacy in terms of interest. And that's Pep Guardiola. Realistically, are you going to get Pep Guardiola for 3 years to manage the national team? Probably not, right? Like, he's with Man City right now, going for that Champions League. He's got, the way he structured his deal, it's a 1 year plus a 1 year option. But if you have a chance to land Pep Guardiola in 2025 and you get a year with him ahead of the World Cup, I think that's got to be your priority. And then the question would be, what kind of coach can you hire to be in charge for 2 years? If you think there's no chance for Pep, or like it's a small percentage chance, then who's the best candidate out there? I think the obvious names are going to be the guys who have been successful in MLS or American. I think those are the guys who are going to come up, or Jesse Marsh being somebody who's been overseas. I think even though he hasn't had a ton of experience, Steve Cherundolo's name will come up. And we know Peter Vermees just inked a 5-year extension. So I think Jim Curtin's name could be added to the mix as well. But it's just tough with the international candidates because, man, like, if they can spend $5 million a year on a coach, all right, or $10 million a year on a coach, okay, we can start talking about some of those big names. But if they're working in like a $2 million range, that list gets just cut like by 75%. And so a lot of it's going to come down to what the board says, like, we can afford, we can pay.